Welcome to Swartz Shorts, the podcast all about the entrepreneurial ecosystem at Carnegie Mellon University and the larger Pittsburgh community.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Swartz Shorts. Today, we are very lucky and excited to have Nadyli Nuñez with us. Nadyli is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon, receiving her degree in decision science, and is currently the executive director of Ascender, where she's playing a huge role in shaping the rapidly growing entrepreneurial scene here in Pittsburgh. Nadyli, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is already fun. Before I wish they recorded what we were talking about before. Okay, for the bonus, for the Patreon.
We want to hear what you have to say, but maybe not Pat and myself.
That is definitely true.
So Nadyli, before we get into Ascender, what you're working on right now, everything like that, we'd love to start by just hearing a little bit more about your background, kind of what led you to this place in time.
Yeah, you know how life goes. You never really expect it. So I actually didn't think I'd get into entrepreneurship. Before, I was always into project management, interested in how organizations function, how they do things, how they attract customers, how they engage customers, even employees. And so it's all of it. It's not just about the user. It's not just about the customer. So I originally grew up in New York City, and in New York, my first taste of entrepreneurship was actually, I think, with Morgan Stanley. They came to my middle school, and they divided my middle school class into two groups, and we had to come up with a product, and then we had to sell it and make money. I was like the treasurer. No one, trusted anyone with the money except me, and I was like, okay, you had to sell. Our thing was a dog tag, which is not very reasonable because the other team was a whiteboard for your locker, which, of course, it makes more sense for a middle schooler, right? But we always pitched it as, well, you can get a whiteboard at Target, but you can't get this dog tag that we designed for this class anywhere else but here. So we did that, and I loved it. It was so awesome, and I loved the energy and people getting really into it. And from New York, obviously, came to CMU, did decision science, worked for Reed Smith, law firm nearby, and then I worked for a health insurance company, and then ended up really at Uprise, which is a social innovation pitch competition. And I was like, oh my gosh, founders are awesome. I love this. I don't think I can do what they do, frankly, because it takes a lot of resilience. It's, selling constantly that product. But I wanted to help them whatever way possible. And after that, I went to Ascender, and I was like, okay, I want something more than just a program, organizational level. And 11 months in, I ended up being the executive director of the whole thing.
It's crazy.
So, yeah.
It's crazy. I feel like your story, and we've talked to you a little bit. We've heard a lot about what you've done. We've seen you around Pittsburgh, kind of all over Pittsburgh. You have your hands dipped into a lot of different things in a great way. It's really impressive because I think all of the things that your touch points, you do them extremely well. So whether it's being on the advisory board for the South by Southwest pitch competition, as we were talking about, or Ascender or Uprise where you were before, could you tell us a little bit about like your motivation to stay involved with everything? Because you say you're not a founder, but I think you kind of have to have that like entrepreneurial grit, that that passion deep down to like do all of those things, but do them really well, because the people who are involved, they matter, and you need to be able to do it for them, right? And so I think it's impressive to see your motivation. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
I think motivations are often coming from our childhood.
Yeah.
For me, my mom, we're immigrants, we're from Dominican Republic, and for us, or for her, she was like, whatever you do it the best. Whether it's your whole job is cleaning bathrooms at a hospital, I want you to be the best one, and hospitals fighting for you to clean their bathrooms. If it's a doctor, if it's a lawyer, if it's a dancer, if it's whatever, but you do it with excellence in mind, always. And when you do that, then you impact other people. And so with founders, I just love that they're problem solvers. That's just awesome. And for me, my strengths are project management and connectivity, and just helping them step away from being so close to the elephant that I don't know, I just like it. I'm excited to do it every morning. There's not so much the accounting for Ascender, but everything else I love, right? And I just schedule it well, and I always love seeing when I first met the founder and then what happens 6 months later or a year later, just even if it's a small part, and I know that at the end of the day it's their effort, but to know that they've generated more revenue, that they've met more people, they've grown as a team, that's just motivating enough for me.
It's amazing.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool. I know Nadyli, we talk about Ascender, and it's really one of the OG incubators here in Pittsburgh that has helped entrepreneurs over years get companies started. A big part of being an incubator is helping entrepreneurs to build that network locally, nationally, in ways that help them to grow and scale their companies. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you very intentionally build your own network in Pittsburgh, nationally, and especially with consideration to communities of color and folks that are genuinely disenfranchised in the current economic and entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Yeah, that's funny. It is one of the OGs. We're actually celebrating 10 years in June. So.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
I'm only responsible for the last two. Bob is Apollo's, the other 8. But, so that's a great question. I think I hate using the word authenticity because I think it's being overused now, right? So let's not use it. I think some of it is just being quiet and just showing up. For one, already I'm Dominican. I grew up in Harlem, so already I've been connected to these kinds of groups in ways that are professional and non-professional. Everyone's a person, right? And while you keep that in mind, you understand that everyone's journey is very different because of systemic issues and what are some things that you understand, what are some things you don't understand, how do you unlearn it? I've talked to Pat about, how do I try to educate myself of things that I need to unlearn as a woman, as a Latina, all these things. And so it's just showing up and being helpful, and if you can't be helpful, then don't say anything, right? Or point them to the right direction. But we get really comfortable going to the same, bar, the same coffee shop, and the same people are there. I constantly am checking what are some events, and I go by myself because I actually don't go with friends. I make friends at the place, right? And then it turns out they're working on a, some kind of business, or they know someone working on a business because they ask me what I'm doing, and that just opens up a whole group of people that maybe at a typical startup drinks, event you might not see.
Mm-hmm. How does that then lead into the folks in the community that you find to be mentors to the entrepreneurs in Ascender's programs? I know the amount of programming at Ascender is unreal, the amount of resources and professionals that you connect your entrepreneurs to in the community. How do you go about forming that roster of experts that can be helpful to your entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that roster, I like that. For me, it's people that I've seen their work, or I know of founders who said they had a great experience with that person. And so even if someone's really well known, sure, we might bring them on, but we'll put them maybe to facilitate a certain program that is small, and I'm actually observing them. It's more kind of a test before I bring them in more intimately to help our entrepreneurs. And keeping in mind, everyone's got their own style, right? So one accountant or one mentor might not work for you, but it will work for Pat, right? And so we just really keep a list of who we believe we want to return or who want to bring back. And during programs, we always ask for feedback from the founders. We're very founder focused. And if they say, it was nice, or they're a great one-on-one person, but not a great, presenter, then we keep that in mind and we have those notes.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good.
And the other part, too, is that these experts, they know so much, but you're telling them to talk for 30 minutes for an hour. Like, what? So we try to direct them very clearly. Like, these are the outcomes we would like them to, we would like entrepreneurs to achieve out of this or get out of this, tangible outcomes. So help guide them, too.
Well, I think founders sometimes, they can go for 10 minutes, or if you give them the stage, they'll go for 3 hours. So you gotta figure out what they can talk about.
No, I don't mind telling them they need to get off.
That's great. That's great. One question that we like to ask all of our guests is, in the Pittsburgh startup ecosystem, the Carnegie Mellon startup ecosystem, we have such an advantage because the community rallies around our founders and our entrepreneurs and folks in the community. What are some things that our listeners can be doing for Ascender and for the entrepreneurs and founders that you support at Ascender to help to continue to build the vibrancy of our community?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. I think there's always something we're trying to innovate in the way we're helping entrepreneurs. Is there a way to optimize our support towards them? How do we make things more accessible differently than what others are doing? We don't seek to duplicate. We want to collaborate, but also do things differently. One of the things I'm trying to work through, if someone has some ideas for a model, is how do we create a temporary sales team for founders? That is such an important task as a founder, but you don't have the capacity. You have all these other things you have to do. And sales is a great skill that anyone can have, right? So how can we build a model that gives them some temporary salespeople to do the cold calling, to work on their workflow, set up their HubSpot, whatever. That's one of them. But also continuously, how do we connect with untapped entrepreneurs that we might not see at the usual places here? Innovation happens at the coffee shop, happens at, the bar. And, it's harder to bump into it because now most of us are home, so innovation is happening in our homes, so it's hard to overhear it and be like, oh, that's interesting, how can I get involved, how can I help you? So I would say with the first two is building a model for sales for founders, and then also how do we generate or find those founders that we don't typically see.
So if you're a founder and you're interested in participating in one of Ascender's programs, how can they get in touch? ascenderpgh.com, and sign up for our newsletter. We have 2 newsletters a month, and not only, events, because, everyone wants you to come to our events, but we also include toolkits. So what are some funding opportunities that are going locally or nationally, templates that we found, other webinars that we thought were really, really good, and sometimes highlights of other founders here as well. So very useful. I've gotten so many compliments about that newsletter, so that means it's worthwhile.
All right, folks, you hear it. Get on the newsletter.
That's
but
right.
Nadyli, thank you so much for coming in. Honestly, it's just listening to you kind of talk about what you're forming at Ascender and all the other projects. I think it's like you're trying to create this community in Pittsburgh of helpers. And I think when you look at incredible entrepreneurial hubs around the country, around the world, that's what they've done is they've created this group of helpers that are willing to go out of their way and not just take, but really give almost more than they take. So we appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nadyli.
Thank you.
Take care.